Greetings, friends. I have an announcement to make. I think I found my favorite book. I've never been able to answer that question because, let's face it, there's a lot of great books. There's a lot of genres. There's a lot of books that do different things for you at different times. And so whenever faced with the question, what's your favorite book? I've never been able to answer. I also can't really answer the question, have you read any good books? What would you recommend? Because until I know what you're looking for, it's really hard for me to answer that question. But that's a story for another day. For today, I wanted to talk about how I've never been able to answer that question. But last week, I read a book that changed that. The book is called A Place for Us, and if you watch my last video, which you can find on this channel, I'll try and link down below, I did a haul video about books I found, or some of the books I found, when I was in Toronto a couple weeks ago on holiday. And one of those books was called A Place for Us by Fatima Farheen Mirza. It's a book that came out in 2018, June 2018. It's really fresh. And there hasn't been there probably is a lot of press about it, but I just hadn't encountered that much about the book. But I saw the book and I thought, I think this is something I've read about online or seen online, and I think it's good, and that's all I really know. And so I bought a copy and off I went. And when I started the book, I didn't read anything online. I didn't read the flap. I didn't Google the author's journey. I just started the book, and I'm trying to not give too many spoilers today because that was a really interesting way to experience the book, but I do want to talk a little bit about some of the reasons why I liked this book so much. Not just like this book, again, favorite book of all time, very special status. So the book opens with a character named Hadia who is getting married, and she's with her sister Huda, and they're talking about how their brother is at the wedding and they haven't seen him for a few years. I think at that time, or maybe later on in the novel, you find out it's been 3 years. And there's an energy and excitement and kind of a nervousness about that, but Hadia is really excited her brother is there. And as a reader, you're kind of curious, well, why has it been so long? These siblings seem connected. And from there, the book then takes you back in time, and not chronologically back generations, but it shows you snippets of this family through time. Sometimes the characters are really young, and then suddenly in the next scene, they're much older and they're in university, and the story is unfolding from where they are at that point. And then it'll go back to the wedding, and then they're really young again. And the story also gives you the perspective of a variety of different characters. You get Hadia's perspective, you get her brother Amar's perspective, you get their mother's perspective. You never really get their second sister Huda, which I thought was really interesting, but you get a number of other characters and you see the same events from different perspectives, which is really intriguing and revealing for this family. And that's the plot of the book, or the setup of the book. And it then kind of takes you through the story of this family. The family's Muslim and they're Pakistani and they're first generation immigrants. So, the kids have been born in the US and the parents moved as adults to the United States. And what I loved about this book, and this is an experience I've never had before in literature, is it was a moment of deep resonance. There's books that I've read that I really have loved. My favorite book of 2017 was Salt Houses, which was an amazing book. I've really loved Homegoing in the past. There's lots of books that I've really loved, but this book, as the characters were saying things and experiencing things and describing their emotions and their attitudes towards particular things, I felt like they were like someone had recorded conversations that I've had, that I've witnessed, that I've been part of. This is not the story of my family specifically, but there's certainly lots of moments where the characters are speaking and I could have written that sentence through transcribing conversations that I've been a part of. One moment in particular, the dad talks about not having friends in school, having colleagues or acquaintances, and I always thought that was a very idiosyncratic line, because colleagues, and I don't know, is a specific word when you're 6 or 7, and the dad in this story talks about that, and that moment just made me giggle. The relationship between Hadia and her brother is really interesting. Definitely connected and identified with that. There's times when she's reading things and she's at the library and she really wants her brother to read everything she's reading. I connected with that. There's so many moments of this novel that I just connected with so deeply, and I really felt myself reflected in literature in the closest way that I've ever felt myself reflected in literature before. The other thing I really loved was that this book it's a big tent book. That's the best way I can describe it. It is a story of a Muslim family, but it is not, sometimes stories either place people in the category of they're super oppressed characters, or they're characters that have just rejected a lot of their faith, or they're characters that are really fighting with their family and really feel frustrated about how backwards or how back in a original homeland their family is. This story doesn't do that. It explores that tension of love and struggle at the same time. So these are characters that are connected to their faith. They're also struggling with their faith in different degrees. And it asks that question of like, is there a place for all of us in that struggle, in that love, to both find a way to each other and find a way to faith and to the divine itself? And that question is explored so sensitively in all aspects of this novel. So an example is the relationship with the father. The father is so strict in particular moments, and I definitely connected with that. But there's such deep love that the children of this family have for their dad, because he's also so soft and so loving and so connected to them and so deeply admiring of the things that they do. And each character has a different relationship with their father and a different relationship with their mother. And so that three-dimensional, flawed, full technicolor rendering of these characters is amazing and something I really appreciated. And I actually found this story really emotional to read. There were times when my husband would come home and I would just be in tears, or I would be in one room, he would be in another room, and I'd have to walk into the room that he's in and just get a hug, because I just needed a moment to breathe and to not necessarily relax, but just to hold that space of that emotion and see where that emotion took me. So if you read this, and I hope everyone reads this book, make sure you have a support partner with you, depending on how closely you identify with the book. But the fact that literature can do that and create that space and enlarge you and make you understand your own faith differently, your relationships with other people differently, make you increase your love of your faith, I thought that was remarkable. And I also love that this novel is, while a very inviting novel, and I think lots of different people can read it regardless of their identity. You don't have to be Muslim to enjoy this book. And in fact, the novel is published by Sarah Jessica Parker, which I think is unusual and surprising and incredible all at once. I'm really glad she published this book. The novel is not trying to show how Muslims are model citizens and how Muslims are deserving of respect and love. It's a story about Muslims living their life. And sometimes I read stories and words are italicized and there's lots of exposition about how great Islam is. It's not that kind of story. It takes you deep into faith. It explains things with a fair bit of specificity, and also leaves you with words that I imagine you'd have to Google. I also love that this story did not ask me to choose between a well-written book and a story that I could resonate with. Sometimes I struggle with books about Muslims because sometimes they're with characters that are a very different age from me, or the books just feel very simple, or it's more of a fast beach read and doesn't feel like a deep literary experience, but it's still enjoyable. And I have a lot of sometimes critiques, if you watch this channel, of books, or there's something stunning but I can't quite connect with it in all aspects. And this book allowed me to kind of bring a desire to see stories that I can connect with, and also real literary value as well. So for all those reasons, this is my favorite book of all time, and if not that, then certainly my favorite read of 2018, and one I definitely think you should check out. Till next time, this is Shagufta. Bye.